Hey, what's up, y'all? Doing poker vlog number 2 today. I just wrapped up work at the office. I got invited to what is going to be a really awesome game tonight. It's going to be good friends, good food, a lot of action. I believe it's going to be a pretty big game. I really appreciate the feedback from the last vlog I did, so here goes number 2. I show up to my friend's beautiful home as everyone's just arriving. We're playing 5-10 no limit Texas Hold'em with a mandatory $25 button straddle. There's a minimum buy-in of $2,000, lots of chips on the table, sushi and drinks are being passed around. I sit down in seat 7 and the game begins. So for this first hand, I'm in the big blind and I look down at King Jack of clubs. The player who's first to act opens for $40. There's one caller. The hijack raises to $75. It gets back around to me and I go ahead and call. 3 other players call, and so we're 5 ways to the flop and the pot is $380. The flop comes out the 4 of spades, 5 of hearts, king of spades. I flop top pair with a decent kicker. I'm first to act and I go ahead and lead out for $225. I'm not saying that leading out right here is the best play, but it's fairly likely I could have the best hand at this point, and it's a really draw-heavy board. So my plan at this point is to put in a good-sized bet and either take it down immediately or get heads up with one other player. However, that's definitely not what happens. I end up getting 3 callers, and we're on our way to the turn 4-handed. The pot is now $1,280. The turn comes out with the 6 of spades. I already wasn't liking my hand too much, and I like it even less now. I check and the player to my left bets $650. The player who's last to act thinks about it for a good bit and then folds, and I think about it for all of 28 milliseconds and fold my king jack. After the hand's over, the dealer lets us take a peek at the river, which would have been the 9 of spades, so this board definitely kept on getting worse and worse for my hand. So not the best start to the night, but there's still a lot more poker to be played. In this next hand, I'm on the button and I put on the mandatory $25 button straddle. I look down at ace of diamonds and deuce of spades. Not the worst hand on the button, but definitely not great. The small blind folds, big blind calls, 2 other players call, and I go ahead and check. The pot is now $105. We're 4 ways to the flop, which comes out king of diamonds, queen of spades, ace of spades. I flop top pair with the worst kicker. It checks around to a player in the middle position who bets $100. I go ahead and make the call, and so does the big blind. So the pot's now $405. We're 3 ways to the turn, which brings the king of clubs. The big blind checks, and the player in middle position goes ahead and bets out $100. At this point in time, given the size of the bets being put out, I'm putting the player in middle position on a hand very similar to mine, such as maybe an ace with a not so great kicker. And I'm also not really putting the big blind on a super strong hand either, given that he's just been calling the middle position's bets just like me. The board pairing makes for what I think is a good opportunity to put in a raise at some point and take down the pot. However, for now I go ahead and just make the call. Much to my surprise though, the big blind now raises to $400 behind me. The middle position player thinks about it for a bit and then folds. It gets back to me and I have to think about this for a second. The raise from the big blind definitely sets off some alarm bells, and it's really unexpected. Up until this point, I was putting the big blind on some kind of drawing hand or another weak ace. Historically though, this opponent has definitely shown that he's capable of bluffing in spots like this. His table image is making me want to pull the trigger on a big bluff even more, thinking I can outplay him and take down the pot later on. I think about it for a few seconds, but I don't want to take too long because if I am going to fire a huge bluff here, I don't want to seem unsure about it. So after quickly thinking things through, I cut out a raise and I fire $1,200. The big blind seems a bit surprised and takes a second to think here. It's always nice when they don't snap call you after firing $1,200 in a spot where you almost certainly have the worst hand. At this point, the pot is over $2,100. After a minute, my opponent asks, "Do you have Jack 10?" implying that I might have a straight.
You have Jack 10?
Given that statement, at this point I'm thinking, crap, he has a king at worst, and he's never folding, period. He takes a few more seconds, sighs, and then says, "Okay, I'm all in."
Okay, I'm all in.
I don't know about you, but in my experience, if someone acts concerned, lets out a big sigh, and then announces, "Okay, I'm all in," that's pretty strong. So the jig's up, I fold my hand, I ended up losing about $1,300 in that pot, and as far as this session goes, I'm straight up not having a good time. In this next hand, I look down at King Queen of Hearts under the gun, and I go ahead and open to $40. I get one caller in middle position, it folds around to the blinds who also fold, and we go to the flop heads up. The pot is now $95. The flop comes out 6, 10, 4, all diamonds. I completely whiff this flop, so I check, and so does my opponent. The turn brings the jack of clubs. I've improved to an inside straight draw, but still have nothing. I go ahead and check, and then the middle position bets $25 by tossing in one green chip. All I have is a gut shot, but at this point in the night, I'm pretty desperate, so I go ahead and make the call. The river comes out, and you guessed it, it's a 9, giving me a king high straight. I'm not worried about diamonds at all at this point, and I definitely want to try to squeeze in a small value bet, so I cut out $65 and put it in the middle. Middle position almost immediately folds, so I don't get any real value out of this hand, but winning the small pot does give me a bit of hope that this session could turn around, and so I'm happy with it. Just a bit later, I look down at ace of spades, king of clubs in the cutoff. After the button straddle and 3 callers, it gets around to me and I bump it up to $125. The button calls, and so does the big blind. We're 3 ways to the flop, and the pot is $425. The flop comes out 4 of hearts, 3 of spades, 7 of diamonds. Not the best board for ace-king, but definitely not the worst. I feel like a lot of the time my opponents could be holding random Broadway cards that might just go ahead and fold to a continuation bet. So, after the big blind checks, I go ahead and bet $225, which is a little more than half pot. The button almost immediately folds, and to my surprise, the big blind almost immediately calls. What I thought was random Broadway cards could definitely end up being something like a middling pocket pair, or maybe he does have a hand similar to mine but just isn't ready to give it up yet. The pot's now $875, and the turn brings the 3 of clubs. The big blind checks right away, and I make the decision to continue telling my story of having a big pocket pair by quickly betting $400. To my surprise, the big blind snap calls by tossing in a purple $500 chip, making the pot $1,675. At this point, I now feel really confident that my opponent has some sort of middle pocket pair, or possibly a hand like 8-7 suited. I'm definitely planning to slow down on the river, unless it's a great card for me, like the king of diamonds. And just like that, I river top pair. I was about to be faced with the difficult decision of firing a third barrel or simply surrendering, but now I'm liking my hand quite a bit. To my surprise, however, my opponent decides to lead out on this river for $600. This does set off some alarm bells. Maybe my opponent got sticky on the flop with a hand like ace-3 suited and then turned trips. But I'm still thinking it's most likely my opponent has some kind of middle pocket pair and is trying to go for a bit of value here on the river. The bet's only 1/3 the pot. This is a pretty easy decision, and even if it wasn't, I'm definitely not folding after I've made my hand by getting lucky on the river. I quickly call, turn over my ace-king, and my opponent is clearly not happy after he sees what happened. And just like that, with a bit more good fortune after going balls to the walls on a really crappy board with ace-king, my stack is finally heading in the right direction. On this next hand, I look down at ace-5 of diamonds in middle position. After the $25 button straddle, 4 players call, including myself, and we go to the flop 5-handed with the pot being $125. The flop comes out 8 of diamonds, jack of diamonds, 5 of spades. Obviously, I flop a monster draw here. 2 players check, and I go ahead and lead out for $75. I get called by the player to my left, the button, and the small blind. The pot's now $425, and the turn brings the 3 of diamonds, which is just what the doctor ordered, or rather prescribed, for my depression during tonight's very long and volatile poker session. Obviously, I like this turn a lot, but what I like even more is the player in the small blind who almost immediately bets $1,000 into this $425 pot by tossing in a yellow 1K chip. You can see in the video the yellow chip already knows what to do and starts rolling in the direction of my stack, but the dealer stops it and we proceed with the hand like we're supposed to. I take a few seconds to think about whether or not I want to fold, just kidding, and then I call by tossing in 2 purple chips. The other players fold, and we head to the river, which is the 10 of spades. You gotta love a clean run out. We're at the river, and I still have the best possible hand. My opponent then decides to check by saying, I check to the camera.
I check to the camera.
And at this point in time, my theme song comes on as I contemplate what to do with the nuts on this river. After a few seconds, I decide on a bet sizing that I feel is likely to get called. I cut out $1,200 and put it in the pot. The small blind proceeds to think about this for a good while. Watching the footage back, I can see he tanked for a good 2 minutes and 40 seconds, which for this cash game is a pretty hefty tank. After thinking it over, he reluctantly decides to lay it down and shows 2 pair for the vlog. My opponent had ace of spades, 3 of hearts, so he had flopped middle pair and turned 2 pair. Credit to him, he made a good laydown, and this is yet another much needed pot on the comeback trail. For this last hand, I looked down at 2 red 4s in the cutoff. At this point in the night, I've been up, down, and all around, and I'm starting to play in a way I can only describe as unorthodox. After the $25 button straddle, 4 players call, and when it gets around to me, I decide to go ahead and bump it up to $125. The cards have been pushing me around all night, so I guess this is where I decided to take a stand and force my own luck. And I'll go ahead and give a disclaimer in advance for this hand. Do not try this at home. This may or may not be deemed as terrible poker. Anyway, after I raise to $125, I get 5 callers, which is not necessarily surprising at this point in the night. The pot's now $750, and we go to the flop, which is the 9 of hearts, 7 of clubs, 3 of spades. Not the best flop for pocket 4s. I gotta say, it would have been pretty sweet to flop a set in a 5-way 3-bet pot at 3 in the morning when I'm stuck thousands, but like I said, I'll just have to make my own luck on this one. At this point in time, the big blind decides to lead out for $300. Sure enough, he gets 4 callers, including myself. This pot is ballooning really quickly, amounting to $2,250 at the moment. At this point in time, I'm aware that I have no shot at winning this hand at showdown unless a miracle happens, so all I can say is I need to come up with a plan, and I need it fast. The turn now brings the 10 of spades. This card is of course no help to me at all, and yet again the big blind leads out, this time for $500. The player in middle position thinks about it for a moment and then folds, and then it gets to me. Again, I know I cannot win with this hand at showdown, but I just don't feel like giving up yet. In my head, I'm thinking that none of my opponents seem extremely strong, and there's a ton of scary river cards that would be good for pulling off a big bluff. When you're as stuck as I am, you don't really need much justification for doing something really stupid, so again, I don't recommend trying this at home, but I go ahead and make the $500 call with what's pretty much air. The small blind also makes the call, and now we're 3 ways to the river in a pot that is now $3,750. The river card is just the type of card my sick mind was hoping for, the 8 of spades. While this card doesn't help me at all, it's definitely something my opponents didn't want to see. The big blind checks to me, and I know what I have to do. I try not to hesitate too much and start cutting out a sizable bet. This game has been incredibly loose action all night, with most players calling massive bets with even 1-pair type hands, so I know if I want to get this bluff through, I need to commit and really make it big. I reached down and grabbed some purple, black, and green chips amounting to $2,200 and put it in the middle. At this point in time, the only thing that's really keeping my hope alive is the amazing song that's playing, which is now the official theme song of my biggest bluff of 2022. After about 1 minute and 42 seconds, which honestly felt like 1 hour and 42 minutes, the player to my left finally lets it go. The big blind also immediately folds, and of course, I go ahead and show everyone at the table the bluff of the night. Alright guys, so quick recap of that fun session. A bit of a debrief. So kind of a rough session. Definitely not the best poker playing in the world. Started off the night a little rough. I remember I tried to pull off a bluff with that ace deuce, which was just terrible. There's also the king jack hand, which I realize some of you might probably think that was a really tight fold, but the $600 bet from that opponent was just like, I have to fold right there. You know, my king jack looks pretty terrible to that bet from that opponent. It was a pretty big bet. And then as the night progresses, I picked up a couple small pots along the way. I think there was the king queen hand, the ace king hand where I sucked out on the river. And then let me see, the ace 5 of diamonds was a pretty big pot. That was good. And then of course the big bluff, I think that was near the end of the night. It might have been kind of right in the middle of the night, but anyways, I ended up losing $1,000 on the whole session. I'm not willing to tell you guys how much I was in for, but I will tell you that I went from really, really, really stuck to just a little stuck. And so it actually felt like a win at the end of the night to be down 1,000. So yeah, it was one of those sessions. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this vlog. I'm gonna try to do more of these in the future, maybe at least once, possibly twice a month, and put it on this poker channel as opposed to my business channel. I decided to separate those two because YouTube started to think that my business channel was all about poker. Please, if you enjoyed this, leave a like, subscribe, comment, and let me know what you like, what you don't like, etc. And I will see you guys on the next one. See you.